This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. This episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast is a short solo episode, and the first of 3 episodes where I share 2 reminders of what mental toughness is and apply it to different domains. The first clip is from Doug Strycharczyk, and it comes from our very first episode, which incidentally is the most popular and the most downloaded episode of the whole podcast, with a lot of gems in. And the second episode is from Sebastian De Chavez, a professional rugby player for Newcastle Falcons, who shares his take on what he believes mental toughness is at an individual level in rugby union. I then go on to share a case study and 1 helpful technique taken from compassionate focus therapy to help people who go through the particular challenge that I talk about. It's a slight tease here. That challenge is something that we all face, but I'm not going to reveal it until after Doug and Seb have spoken. So Doug's going to start now, where he briefly describes mental toughness.
In 2002, people looked at that term toughness and said, oh, that sounds macho, sounds very masculine. Well, it isn't about being macho and it isn't about being masculine. Just to kill one myth, we know that the mental toughness profiles for men and women are virtually identical. So it's definitely not a male concept. It seems to apply equally. Well, it does apply equally to males and females. But the essence of it is really the word mental. This is about how we respond mentally to things that happen to us. So it's about our mindset, our mental responses. It isn't about being macho or tough in that sense of the word. It's about being tough in the resilient sense of the word.
So Seb, how would you describe mental toughness in elite professional rugby?
For me, I'd say mental toughness is being able, on an individual level, being able to get your job done, being able to perform your role to the best of your ability when things aren't particularly going your way. And I'd say, the most mentally tough players I've played with and played against, when things aren't going their way, when things aren't, when they don't really want to do certain things, when they have to change their plan, they just get on with it straight away and they execute under massive amounts of pressure. But also, like I say, things haven't gone to plan and they still just keep on believing in themselves and executing their job. So I'd say that for me would be a definition of mental toughness.
So 2 sentences stood out to me from those clips where Doug stated that mental toughness is about how we respond mentally to things that happen to us. And Seb confirms this to an extent too, where he talks about being able to get your job done when things aren't going your way. So I alluded to a challenge that we all face earlier. And unless there are any robots listening today to this podcast episode, then I'm guessing you're guilty of making mistakes and errors. I know I certainly do. Every day, whether it relates to choices I make on the golf course when I'm playing, when I'm working, when I'm parenting, or in general day-to-day life, I most definitely get things wrong. No doubt about it. And I'm sure you do too. So we're going to talk about fear of failure and recovering from making mistakes. In sport, when someone does make a mistake, often as an onlooker, we might say they're only human. And when we say words like this, we're demonstrating the emotion of compassion, which occurs from the recognition that we as humans aren't perfect. Yet, when we are the culprit making the mistake, we often find displaying self-compassion is really, really tough and virtually impossible for many, especially in a sporting environment when you and your performances are being judged, and often harshly, or at least you think they are. And when your emotions are so up and down, you're riding that roller coaster ride because you're striving for confidence and you've got such a focus on results. And where many people go wrong, and I've been one for a large part of my life, until I begun to understand different psychological techniques, Certainly when I was younger, when I played football, I berated myself. Playing golf until the last decade I did. I was exactly the same in the workplace, in my previous career, and then while studying my degree and master's degree. I was really hard on myself. And many of my clients, they're guilty of it too. They believe that a harsh, critical voice is needed to make sure that they play at their best. They feel that it gives them an edge to be hard on themselves. It's going to extract motivation when things go wrong. This can be a common theme across a lot of sports. Yet, it is also a common thing that people get wrong. They think that by being self-compassionate, by being kind to yourself, that it equals self-pity. This isn't the case. By being self-compassionate doesn't mean that you're going to just sit on the couch and be lazy, that you're not going to hit the gym, that you're not going to push yourself in training or in a match. They see self-compassion as lacking in motivation, but actually research tells us this is not the case. When we look at research, self-compassion is actually associated with greater personal initiative to make changes in a person's life. It's also correlated with greater intrinsic motivation, which certainly in sport and in life and business, that's what you're after, rather than extrinsic motivation. Last of all, self-compassion, it's also positively associated with mastery of goals and negatively associated with performance goals. So mastery of goals is when we focus on the things that we can control, the process, as we often say in sports psychology. And this research comes from Kristen Neff's fantastic work. I'd really recommend that you have a look at different resources that she has online and perhaps go on to read her book on the topic. The link to her website is in the show notes. So how is it that we can help athletes become more aware that self-motivation can be achieved compassionately? Well, let's try this exercise where you're going to become more aware of how you use self-criticism to motivate yourself, as well as gaining a new perspective on self-motivation by being more compassionate and supportive. If you're not walking your dog or not out for a run or driving the car perhaps, please do get a pen and paper. This is going to help you. So step 1, consider a situation. A situation when you've used self-criticism to find motivation, and make a note of that situation either physically or mentally. Perhaps if you're a footballer, on the pitch you've misplaced a pass and then you've chased straight after the player in anger. That helped you, right? Step 2 now. Let's think more deeply about this situation. And what personal characteristics did you criticize in the hope of seeing something positive occur? So what did you say to yourself? Perhaps you said, that was terrible. I'm a rubbish passer. I might get taken off if I do it again. In this case, you're passing, being rubbish. That would be the personal characteristics. You've clearly put yourself down and you've labeled yourself as rubbish. Step 3, how do you feel when you're using self-criticism to motivate yourself? So again, the footballer may feel angry with him or herself, and then they go on to be really, really determined to win the ball. Yet at the back of their mind, though, he or she might be very, very fearful that another missed pass is going to mean that their coach or their teammates get on their back. This might well mean that they play in fear and that they don't fully express themselves. They play the safe pass. Their movement's not great. They shy away from communicating and demanding the ball. They hide in different areas. So a reminder of the question there. How do you feel when you are using self-criticism to motivate yourself? Step 4 now. So let's come up with a gentler or a kinder method of self-motivation. How could you produce for yourself what a loving parent or a kind, caring coach might use to guide you? Write down some possible ways to motivate yourself in a much more thoughtful and self-compassionate way. For example, you might want to imagine or picture a dog or a polar bear or something like that, and think about the tone of voice and the words that you use when you think about this dog or the polar bear. For the dog, it might be when you're giving it a cuddle on the sofa. Consider the voice that you use. Is it gentler? It's unlikely to be critical, isn't it? Or judgmental. And this gentler voice, this less critical voice could well help you. It's really important to recognize that tone. Step 5, I'd like you now to write down some supportive self-talk or a message that would help you meet your goals. For example, winning the ball back as soon as possible if you are that footballer, and then approaching the rest of the game confidently. So perhaps after you've made that initial run to get the ball, you might start saying to yourself something a bit different in a kinder voice, thinking about the tone that we talked about in step 4. Perhaps you might say, it's okay. Mistakes are part of the game. I'm human like everybody else. Then you try to G yourself up, encouraging yourself with, come on, let's concentrate on the next phase of the game. So you'll notice that your self-talk is much less judgmental. You're able to see the bigger picture. You recognize that you're not a robot. And then importantly, at the end, you're going on to instruct yourself on what it is that you need to do next, what you're going to do next. When you say, come on, concentrate on the next phase of the game. This is certainly a much better approach than staying stuck in the past and berating yourself and then just watching the game pass you by. So I hope you've found these 5 steps useful, this exercise useful. To sum up, really what I wanted is to help you recognize that if you are self-critical, that you do need to understand the pain and the different emotions that you are putting yourself through. So by trying to be more self-compassionate, you really can empower yourself to make better decisions. Encouraging, loving, supportive, kinder language and a tone of voice in your head is a much more powerful motivator than negativity and fear, which is often a habit that a lot of people slip into, especially in sport, be that athletes, coaches, support staff. They often think this type of approach is soft, but actually it's not the case. And it's highly likely to motivate you intrinsically. So why not give it a bash? There will be more to follow on this topic, more exercises over the next 2 weeks. If you'd like to ask any questions or get in touch with me, feel free to join me in the Sports Psychology Hub, a Facebook group I've got set up. You can also leave a positive review, a 5-star rating, if you don't mind, on the podcast. If you wish, go into Apple, you can do so there. Have a great week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.